I'm Kareem from Open Source Defense, and this is a conversation with Rob from Constellation Response, the store for gun culture 3.0. If you like it, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to our Substack, our X, and our Instagram account, and a reminder that we run Open Source Defense Capital, which invests in the civilian defense industry. So if you are a founder in that space or anything related to it, just reach out. And now here's our conversation with Rob. So what's your background? How did you get up to speed on like 3D printing, UAVs, radios, this whole space?
Yeah, so my background is just professionally, I worked in the film industry for years. But what got me into this space was I grew up in Boy Scouts and got my Eagle and was always interested in preparedness. When I met my wife, I got her into backpacking and she got me into hunting. That kind of just furthered me down that trail. I also that got me into guns. And so as I got more and more into gun culture in that evolving space, it's been cool seeing like a gun culture 3.0 transition to kind of a community preparedness and community response really evolve. And really, the reason why I founded Constellation Response is because I saw there was a real lack of trying to demystify the technology that really supports a lot of that preparedness effort to the gun culture side of things. There's a lot of people that are just grabbing like random radios or whatever, and they're trying to figure it out, but they're not really being effective with it. And that's kind of my mission is to demystify those products and also offer really good products on the site that will support those efforts.
How about on the business side? So you like we're all kind of nerds in this space. So the tech side, and that seems to come easy for most of us. But you run this thing. This is your job, your job. How do you manage, like from an OSD capital point of view, when we talk to entrepreneurs? It's how did you get the chops to figure out how to run this business?
So yeah, man, a lot of it has been learning as I go, but kind of again with my background, the organizational side of things, a lot of what I did in film was production management. So it was uh, the creative side comes naturally to me, but then professionally being a good manager, being able to work with creatives, prepared me to work with myself very well. And then on the flip side too, my wife actually works in finance, and so being able to have an in-house financial consultant and how to set up, oh, like immediately she was like, you need to set up an LLC like now. As soon as you had this idea, go make an LLC. And having someone that's really good at advice like that, that you're married to, that you can just ask questions of has been really beneficial.
Okay, so
I
there
feel
is an outside console that you have. You got it easy, but for budding entrepreneurs in this space, I guess the takeaway here is don't be shy about getting filled in on that LLC financial side, which is easier these days with LLMs. And I set up a bunch of stuff just by querying various LLMs and for even rent contracts and other contracts and lightweight stuff. So that's good to know. Cool.
Yeah.
I think like two things people don't understand if they haven't been close to it is how big a deal it is to be an Eagle Scout and the like project management in film production and just like getting a film produced and like shot is I don't think there are better people in the world at just like making stuff happen. We're like, oh crap, we have like half an hour, we're losing the light, and we need a circus elephant, fireworks, like go make it happen. And somehow they do. Um,
And and we
yeah,
don't have an elephant yet. We need the license to get the
exactly.
elephant. Yeah, the clearance from the city. Yeah. Um, Yeah, no, it definitely like there that was very beneficial. It's fun now though because I do actually, as part of the company, I also have and just for my friend group that I developed since I moved to Austin, a lot of like veterans, former military. A lot of them are ex like special forces guys. And when you talk about like getting it done and that mindset of preparedness and being ready kind of for anything, those guys are insane. So it's fun because I've developed my own community of not well, it's just me here at the company. There's a whole community here supporting it outside of just myself and sometimes also my wife as well. So yeah, no, it's been good.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that community part because you're pretty unique. Well, I would say less unique as more people do it, but the community part we'll get into. We got a bunch of questions on that. But for
Yeah.
people to know you better, I mean, when I look at your stuff, the three things I take away are drones, comms and gear are your focus, just for people who are wondering what Constellation Response is about. And it looks like the drones and the comms are definitely your specialty in terms of your subject matter expertise. So let's maybe dial down on the comms part first.
Yeah.
You like push. Well, let's back up one step further. What's going on in civilian comms? I mean, Isaac Botkin obviously is bananas for a really good source for the latest and greatest on civilian comms. But the civilian defense industry, like comms, should be and is a very big part of it. So what's going on there now?
Yeah, yeah, so you're totally right. It should be a much bigger part than I think it is. And unfortunately, it hasn't changed a ton for over the last couple of decades in the ham space. A lot of it has been dominated by ham radio. And those radios are cool, but they're also like they've just been completely just outclassed by a cell phone, right? There's so much going on in a cell phone, and there's just if you're just not a hobbyist, you're not going to be interested in radio really anymore. People aren't necessarily packing UHF, VHF radios in their backpack anymore when they're going backpacking. Even like the use cases have just narrowed down a lot to where it's just hobbyists. And so in that way, there are going to be a lot of hams that are going to be mad at me when I say this, but ham radio has kind of stagnated. There's going to be people they're going to be like, well, there's this new like digital call that is really cool. And it's like, okay, cool. But like, not a lot of people know about that stuff. There's not a lot of innovation going there. And, it's been hard as gun culture has kind of moved into this preparedness space and been interested in comms. When you start telling people, hey, you got to, um, go take a class, pay for that class, go pay for a license and a test and take that. And then also, by the way, you got to dox yourself every 10 minutes when you're on the air with your call sign that has your address on there. And then also, you can't use any encryption. You can't even try to encode your language on the air. You can't do X, Y, and Z. People just go, well, that's not cool. And it's just like not fun. Like, why would I get into this? And also, a good radio like you can get a Baofeng for like $20, or we sell some custom programming ones to get you started on the site for a little bit more that are packaged up with some extra stuff and some programming. But like to get like a good radio, you're spending 500, $600, and that's like an AR. And so like I don't even know if I like this thing yet. And then like an HF radio is maybe $1,000 to get you into that. So it's just like, all right, people just kind of tune out and they kind of move on, or they'll put a Baofeng on their kit and run with it. So what I've been really excited about, honestly, just because the accessibility is so there and the reliability has actually been really good. Things considered, it could be more reliable, but when you're talking ham and off-grid comms, like reliability is never a guarantee. So, but Meshtastic has been really cool. So that's been one thing I've been really pushing a lot because for one, it's license free. And it's can do encryption, and it has really good range because each radio is a repeater. But it's a
So maybe you could,
walkie-talkie. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So how does so people probably I didn't know until recently what Meshtastic was, and so what you're
yeah,
saying it's a non-licensed, non-ham
yeah.
device, and obviously the word mesh is in it, so that implies like individual nodes are forwarding and doing packets forward and back, right? But it's in a frequency that is not regulated or more loosely regulated.
Yeah, so it is regulated, but it's a scientific band. So it's an area. It's less than 1 gigahertz, basically the 915 kind of neighborhood, 915 megahertz range. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like if you're using IoT devices, like if you get like a thermostat or like a Zigbee device, you're not having to get a license and take a class to go, buy that device and hook it up to your Wi-Fi and your other network, right? Like that'd be insane. So people spotted that and were like, hey, that's awesome. Maybe I can send texts over that because you can send other data, like open and close my blinds with it. Why not? And so, um, and because it's just little packets, they were able to figure out basically, formats like LoRa, where you could send like those messages really far with low power, low data. And while it's really slow, it's not really good for real-time communication. It is really great. Like you can talk about 30 miles on it here in Austin, which is awesome. And if you need to get a message out, like, hey, I need help, you can also send GPS coordinates, location data. And so that's really useful. And actually, the guy who makes the node that we currently carry on the site, he deployed around 100 nodes. He's in Tennessee. And when they got hit by Helene, he deployed around 100 nodes, covered an area of about, um, in one direction is about 60 miles long that he was able to cover, but I'm not totally sure on how wide he got that corridor. But he was the first like line of defense for communications. There was some ham support, but it was just those Meshtastic devices. And he's able to do things like track like aid workers and like that as they were going through the woods because it's just as an accountability tool because it plugs into ATAC, so he was watching where they were going. And so just the tool is really cool when it's there. It's just not quite like up to the standard that you like everyone wants. Everyone wants to be able to speak and have a conversation over an off-grid device. And so that band is capable of pushing that amount of data through. Now, in fact, actually, you could even theoretically push video through on it as well. But just the chips and the radios aren't quite there yet. So hopefully, maybe this year we'll get our first round of radios, like boards that will actually support that. And so there's a ton of people like really trying to get that next generation radio out.
So is it just a really naive question? Is it just text based, or are you putting voice packets over as well?
Yeah, so Meshtastic is text based. There's another standard called Reticulum that can do voice.
How much of this is like, one thing I think about when you look at cell phones, say, right? Cell phones came out were like generally available in the 80s, started with voice, and had certain niche applications, right? Like, okay, I'm Gordon Gecko. I need to take a call from my limousine on the way to work, whatever. And then, came down in price, and maybe it's like doctors got them. Then you get text added to that in, I guess, the late 90s or the aughts, and like T9 and all that stuff. But then cell phones didn't like really take off and become the cell phones we know until they got data, right? Like general internet data. And so a lot of this seems to be, you could say, well, okay, really like the way that ham radio turned out has really sucked, and it's overregulated, and there's a lot we could do there. But there's also just like, okay, the content you are communicating to some extent may dictate what does this end up actually getting used for? What's the ceiling on this technology? What do you see as like, Meshtastic unlocking that that was hidden or that was locked when ham was kind of the only option?
Yeah, I think it unlocks just a wider market and interest in people because when you tell someone, hey, you can buy like so you can get devices, I think, as cheaply as $40. That might just be a bare board right now. I think you can get fully set up devices for like 50 to $60 though online. I haven't checked some of the lower end nodes yet that are fully out of the box, on their prices in a bit. But um, you're talking less than $100. That's lunch money for a lot of people. I don't like not to underwrite that, but when you're talking about, hey, this is a device that could really help you out, that's nothing. And so they're willing to try it out. And then if it works, cool, let me go get a rooftop repeater. Let me go get this. And so it really expands quickly from there. When you start to go down that rabbit hole, you might think, oh, I just bought a $60 node. Now you have like $1,000 investment in like infrastructure that you have put up yourself. And that's really been like the thing. Because on the flip side of this too, you mentioned like cell phones, how they kind of dominated. We were so used to cell phones being at least semi-reliable. Like, we always used to joke like, oh, it's a phone that doesn't, make calls or whatever. It would drop a call, but it was never life or death. But now, like, in 2021, we had the Texas freeze here. Helene's happened. We've had a bunch of hurricanes all over the country. California wildfires. The ability for you to have another means of communication when there's a disaster, or just like even just random AT&T is just like, hey, we don't work on the East Coast today. Like that's really important to have that, your pace plan kind of built out. So I don't think Meshtastic really fits in like as a like your pace plan is like your primary alternative contingency emergency. I think it's really good in that emergency, or maybe the contingency slot. I don't think like I think you should have some alternatives as well, kind of between there. But things are if you're running out of options, man, it's really solid and it really works and it's fun.
I think the two spots, if I was to market this, and you
Yeah.
are marketing this because you do want to make more sales of mesh tech devices,
Yeah.
obviously the Achilles heel of the cell network is what you want to really focus on, right? It's like the
Yeah.
cell network can go down and has gone down, and you can show examples from any number of things, and just make people think like, what do you do when your phone just doesn't do anything over the air, right? And that should scare enough people, at least the crazy prepper, even not even preppers, but people who are at least a little bit like sensitive to preparedness and contingency of like hurricanes, natural disasters, not zombie apocalypse.
People with the survival
So
instincts, you know.
yeah, just like base survival instincts. It doesn't need to be like crazy people in this room instincts, but it's like more normal people, right? So this is kind of a meta point here, but getting the normies more involved in this and to pay attention is the job we have to do.
Yeah.
And so that's one part, and the other part is the fun part. And we have a zillion ways. If everything's up and running, you have a million ways to do comms with your friends. You can use Signal, Telegram, Messenger, WhatsApp, SMS. It's endless, right? But it is kind of fun to say like, hey, let's use a decentralized, completely anonymous, like bare bones, always works system where I can just BS with my buds, right? And that's why I use CB in the radio. CB radio in the 70s is how I would call my friend up the hill because it cost money to talk on the phone in those days, right? So we'd get on channel 7 or channel 9, no, not 19, but we'd pick a channel at a predetermined time and we'd talk on the CB in my dad's station wagon, right? I mean, in the driveway. So I think that use case and that kind of attraction is still out there. So that this kind of brings up the next question I have is how, Constellation Response definitely has this community priority for it, right? So the first one is comms. How are you getting people up to speed on this, on comms? Like, what can you do at the community level to make people competent and engaged with this stuff?
Yeah, so the big thing too has been it's been interacting with whenever a customer places an order for be it a programmed radio or with a Meshtastic device. I usually will follow up like for the programmed radios. I'd always do this, but even for Meshtastic nodes, I'll follow up with an email and be like, "Hey, so we got your order. What are you looking to do with this? Because it'll help me set up the device for you better." Meshtastic's a little bit easier to do because it's kind of plug and play. It really is just a lot easier. But the on the comm side of things, if people are like, "Hey, I want to be able to listen into emergency channels," that's one set of use cases. If they're wanting to be able to make contacts in a disastrous situation, that's another use case. So I'll normally suggest like, "Hey, here's our normal programming, but if you want me to look around what's in your area, I'll do that for you." And so that's been the big thing is just customer to customer targeting them. But then also putting out like blogs on their education. I haven't done that a ton this year because I've had to dive down the drone rabbit hole, which is like it's a very deep rabbit hole, especially with the FPV style drones. It's a steep learning curve. But the education side of things too, just general. Here's how radios work. Here's how this stuff all functions together. And then also here's how you can use it in your daily life and illustrating that has been big. And like you said too, just talking about how unreliable cell phones have been lately. I think everyone kind of knows that now. Like we've all been stung a bunch of times on that. And it's kind of like in like 2020. My wife before 2020, my wife was always saying like, "Why do you need an AR? Why do you need body armor?" She was just used to like hunting guns and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, 2020 rolled around. She's like, "You have that AR and that body armor, right?" I'm like it's good to go. And I was like, "Yeah, we're all set." So.
How has the evolution of this compared to your expectations over like the past 5 years? I think it's kind of just observing it a little from the outside. Like this is not an area I'm an expert in at all. Um, it's like ham radio, for example, is one of those things that for a long time has always been like 5 or 10 years away from making it really big. Um, and it's still pretty niche. I think that seems to be changing a bit. But then on the other hand, like when you look around over the past 5 years, there's a huge acceleration in the radio space generally, and like way more people getting into this stuff, ordering it, talking about it. So it's kind of like both below expectations in some ways, maybe in like further back than 5 years, and then above. I'm curious, like, what's your take on that? How do you see it from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think what you're noticing it's just so transformative. So like what a ham radio usage is for a lot of people, it's kind of if you're doing it as a hobby, you're hopping on the air, you're maybe like rag chewing and talk about like how your sciatica is acting up, or maybe you're just trying to make contacts all over the all over the world randomly, um, and just say, hey, like, oh, you're in Argentina, that's great, cool, moving on to the next person. So it's kind of a whole thing. Um, and versus our use case is so specific, it's been really cool. There's been products that have come out. Like SDRs have blown up, and being able to like really scrape an entire section of bandwidth just to see, hey, what's going on, poke in, here and there, and analyze that. No, like civilian SIGINT is just kind of a crazy concept to even like have thought about 5 years ago, but it's a thing and it's here. In fact, even I think at this point, I think the real question is to kind of rolling forward is not even just necessarily comms, but networking wirelessly. So Halo is something I mentioned earlier as a comms tool, but all it is basically it's just Wi-Fi broadcasts really far. It's lower bandwidth than like a 5G Wi-Fi, but it's can reach a lot farther theoretically. If you with some of these higher power radios, it should be able to reach a couple miles, which is cool. Um, but if you're able to push 300 megs a mile away and then mesh that up with other people, that's things get really interesting there. So we're also, since we're talking about a lot about comms, maybe this is a transition to drones too, but like, David from K9 is always talking about drone swarms and stuff like that. Well, how do you network that? How do you control that if you're a civilian? Well, the the space for comms is really starting to facilitate that in a really cool way.
That's
It's
super
a
cool.
it's
I mean, oh, go ahead, Chuck.
a good transition. I kind of wanted to wrap up on
Yeah.
comms, and kind of get to how you transitioned from, I guess, comms are a big part of drones, obviously, because it's a
Yeah.
crazy comm problem to solve. I learned that I was at Anduril. I learned a ton about UAVs and what the market for is kind of what the market is for the various devices that do over-the-air control of UAVs, dominated by Silvus and maybe one other. So how did you get into the drone space?
Yeah. So that was kind of a actually, so I guess, man, for one, drones are cool. I've always wanted to get more into drones. So maybe that's the real reason, is that they're just cool. But the other flip side of things is, as Meshtastic has kind of really come to fruition and really been something I've focused on. The name of the game always with radio is, how high can you get your radio, right? For to increase line of sight. Because if you have line of sight, you can probably make contact with somebody. Good chance. So if you have a really small and light radio, you can attach it to a drone and put it 400 feet up above your head wherever you are, which is pretty great. So that was the first kind of impetus for me to kind of figure out drones. Obviously, the stuff happening in Ukraine is a different use case from what I'm wanting, but it's accelerated drone development in such a way that has made things really interesting. And so, yeah, that's where I started getting into drones. And then as you start learning about drones, you realize like it's all RF. Like, yeah, it's always has been. It's that meme of the two astronauts. And so like there's so much crossover between radios. If you're good with radios, you're going to be good with drones. If you just spend the time in the sim, that's really all you have to do. The learning curve in terms of like how to solder a drone together, how to repair one where you're going to lose frequency and signal and all that stuff. You're going to know how that's all going to work. And you also know like digital versus analog, systems. And um, it just really complements one complements the other. And then I think in the field too, from a preparedness standpoint, like I kind of hinted at this, but I really do think we're at the dawn of the age of the civilian talk to be able to go support people as they're doing disaster relief stuff. You can have somebody back at a talk being able to help support them with information. And so that's going to be a radio guy, and that person can use drones to help support that team. So it's really cool.
That's awesome. I feel like
Yeah.
it's been a long time since people. It's more and more of this stuff gets abstracted away from users over time, right? Like, when was the last time people really had to care about like the details of their Wi-Fi router?
Mhm.
And this is almost kind of a reversion to a cool space where like the networking layer matters, the hardware matters. That's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I think like one thing on the drone space that you're doing is drone training courses, like selling those, which is reminded me of, you know, the internet thing of like, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you are armed. That's, I think that's like a Pat McNamara line. And then like training courses became a big thing, right? It's not just you buy an AR and put it in the closet. Um, and drones are on the very early side of that, where it's like, okay, like first of all, the how civilians are using drones is itself very nascent. Um, but then like pushing the skill on that is super interesting. What are you seeing there? Like what do people need to learn, and what do they want to learn?
So yeah, so maybe I should open this with our warranty policy and tell you why the training course is so good. So the warranty policy for drones that we have is 14 days or until your first flight. Because the expectation is if you don't know how to fly one of these drones, you're going to immediately like flip it over and destroy it somehow because they're the ones that we have on the site are extremely powerful. They're 10-inch drones. Like that means the prop is 10 inches, so it's nearly a foot per prop on the quad. And they go very fast, over 80 miles an hour. They're not toys by any stretch of the imagination. So if you don't know what you're doing with that, you're going to fly it somewhere and immediately probably destroy it. And so the training is really great. For one thing, it fits perfectly with our mission at Constellation Response because it's geared towards well, it's military and civilian training. I'll put it that way. It's the first course that we're offering right now is a crash course. So if you have zero experience, you can go learn how to fly this thing on other people's drones. And the course training comes with the drone. So you get goggles, the controller, the drone, everything you need to get going, like batteries, all that stuff. It may only be a 5-inch drone that you're buying, depending on what package, or you could buy a full hourglass like what we have on the site. But you basically go from zero to up in the air by that one weekend. You learn how to not only do you learn how to do like to fly, but you also learn how to sim and get set up on that. You also then learn how to repair. So whenever we've had this last week or 2 weekends ago now, when I was out there, we had a couple people that had some pretty bad crashes, which became training aids, which was pretty great. So then we were, people fried the radios or they, broke an arm or whatever, and so we pulled those pieces out, put them into a new drone, and get them back up in the air, and it was great. So. The other thing is too, because it's a mix of military and civilian training, it's really unique. It's not just like, like there's a lot of drone racing training out there where you learn how to fly for a specific purpose. And that's cool, but that's like, you're not delivering supplies, you're not bridging comms, you're not doing the kind of thing that you really want to do. You might get very skilled at high speed maneuvering. That's about it. So this is very much geared in the training that we have, the future training that we have planned is really all about either military doing some spicy drones, or if you're a civilian, it's more about like supporting disaster relief or preparedness applications with these drones. Um, so it's been awesome. That training alone, again, I had zero time in the air with an FPV drone before I got there. I've been flying ever since I get back. I've gotten back. If I crash, I'm like, I can fix this. This is no problem. And I did not have any of those skills before I attended.
Is just a question on mechanics. Is it pretty much going to be the default that we're all going to use SPV version of drones? We're going to fly drones versus via FPV versus line of sight. Are the guys still doing line of sight like the guys in the gun world still using iron sights and everyone else is on red dots kind of thing?
I mean, you'll definitely be using vision, some sort of vision system, whether or not that's FPV or if that's looking down at a monitor of some kind. I mean, you're not going to be traveling, I don't know how good your eyesight is, especially as you get older. My eyesight's not getting any better. So like, if you're really wanting to fly a mission to go, versus like drop off like medical equipment to someone up a mountain somewhere where the roads are out, like you're going to need some sort of assistance there. Most of the American drone manufacturers have been focusing on FPV. I think mostly because the gimbal are harder to source here on the state side. That actually is one question I have out to second order effects. They're busy gearing up for another round of training and some other stuff right now, so I'm like holding stuff till next week. But they have a lot of plans to like support more styles of drones, like so the gimbal drones, like the floaty ISR type drones, or the not just FPV. But FPV is awesome because you can fly further with it, and that's like a huge benefit.
So, I mean, I hate bringing this up, but I'm going to be
Yeah.
pedantic, and you can correct me because, like, because of the government, technically you can only fly a drone line of sight, right? So if you
Yes.
are not, you're supposed to have a pilot's license to do pure over the horizon. We're just not going to pay attention to that, I hope.
So hopefully not. Like again, too, like anyone out there, please go get your license and adhere to all federal laws that may or may not apply. But at any rate, it's up to you as the operator to do that. But yeah, like I'm hoping that things get loosened up to where people, if they're capable of flying safely, like I hope the law basically comes down to if you're doing something, safe, that's fine. If you're doing something unsafe, that's against the law. And so that's kind of a not the right way to write law. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm hoping that that kind of gets a little bit more ironed out as opposed to being afraid of line of sight. So
What do you
yeah,
think is the? Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say too, I do really think, and maybe it's something where people that are in the drone community, people that are in the radio community, get together on this. But like we desperately need a GOA for like radio frequency rights. Like currently the only thing really protecting that is, um, you know, basically some hand users, and that's about it. There's only so much frequency allocation out there, and it's your right as an American to be able to use it. And a lot of that is allocated for other interests. There's corporate interest in being able to own certain bands and things like that too. So, um, yeah, the ability for you to access those frequencies is really important. And I just don't know of an organization that exists like that currently, but we really need something like that to be able to get people to utilize that stuff more easily.
How do you think this plays out in the consumer market? Um, we're talking about kind of prosumer applications, disaster relief, some military stuff. Fast forward the like confluence of radios and drones 10 years. What's the most consumery application? Like on some level, with all of this stuff, think about computers, like most of the people who use computers today have no idea how they work and no idea how to operate them on a, kind of close to the metal level. And so, what does that mean for drones? Like, what will the person who is using a drone without having any idea how to use a drone, and same deal for a radio, in 10 years, like, what will they be doing with it?
For radio, I'm pretty sure the best use case is still in 5 to 10 years is going to be the best use case as it is currently, and it's just to talk trash to your friends at the range. That's the that's my favorite use
Critical,
case.
that's mission critical.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, I do think that like so there's the prosumer side of things, and it really again too like the consumer and the kind of more professional use, man, there's such a wide range of that. And typically the higher in price, the more manual operation you have to apply to it too. So that's a tricky question. So I think the getting devices that basically work where like yeah, you can just take it to the range, plug it into your gear, your kit, and you can talk trash to your friends or whatever is really kind of the goal for comms. And then for drones, it's going to be interesting because the that landscape is changing a lot. And I guess to an extent, same thing with comms, because nothing is really made in the U.S. and there's a huge push to go that way. It'll be interesting to see what happens there in terms of innovation, and allows people to start flying with less control, or do we want to drive towards more control? Like that's a big thing with the drones that we sell. I get texts from people all the time with photos of their DJI that's like, hey, you haven't connected to the cloud yet in like a month, and we need to go hook it up to the internet before we will let you fly. And otherwise you're grounded. And so like our drones always fly. If you got a battery plugged into them, they're going to go. So, what level of control to allow someone that doesn't really know what they're doing uh, to get in there is kind of the next step too. So,
Oh, Yeah, I'll put it out there. I'll press you on this. So it's a problem with UAVs right now with drones is that there is no super obvious civilian use case, right? The one that we all thought of years ago was I want like 2 drones on inductive charging pads in launch boxes on my roof. And if there's just any sort of security, I don't want a stupid alarm going off. I mean, you can have the alarm go off, but I want drone response, my own drone response that'll track somebody and do all that. So that should be a slam dunk for home security for, for any number of people. The other one that I'm disappointed never really took off was the personal action photographer, right? So you're doing your waterfall hike, you're doing your USPSA course run, you're doing some other adventure thing with a dirt bike or skiing, and that drone is just doing a whole bunch of cinematic stuff. And there's been obviously, you would know that all the companies have tried that, but I have not seen that like bite take off to any degree. And the third one is, and these are all completely autonomous. Like I don't want to deal with any of this nonsense about connecting to it, flying it, like anything. I just want the ability. And the third one, which is kind of a big one, which may be obviously a big future thing, is obviously everyone's talking about drone delivery. That it seems hard to scale that. What about like, why don't I have my own errand drone where I'm just like, I buy a good solid kind of a meaty drone, like a small subcompact car that goes off and gets my stuff and brings it back. Like, you need to go pick this up. Like a personal Uber, but it's my line of, it's my A to B direct line to whatever shopping, errands, go do something for me and come back kind of thing, right? So I think that's we got to get to that level of autonomy and convenience for these to become like true consumer items, which I think we'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and that's I think the reason why some of that stuff hasn't taken off because it never quite works quite as well. It's like an LLM. Sometimes you're like, this is really good until you ask it about something that you know a lot about, and you're like, okay, it's whatever. And so same sort of thing. So I think that level of autonomy definitely unlocks a lot of stuff like security. Like nailed it. We've actually so I don't know if you're familiar with CMAX Executor on Twitter. He's doing the War Dragon projects to be able to detect drones. But he does a lot of basically civilian signals intelligence stuff. And that was one use case I thought of for his War Dragon is you could pick up, hey, there's a random cell phone on my property if you're a rancher or something like that. You could have a drone go out and go see who that is. Like say in West Texas or something like that, where you're concerned about people cutting through your fence and cutting across your land or something like that. So there's definitely a ton of that use case out there. So it just depends on how autonomous things are, and then also how expensive it is. Because currently those drone systems, it's funny too because I kind of in film I had gotten really into drones to the extent of like needing to rent them and acquire them for shoots and things like that. Um, and I knew how much roughly they cost if like one went down. And then I looked up the price of a DJI like recently, and I'm like, this thing is insanely expensive. It was like, they like doubled or tripled in price since I last looked at them. Maybe 5, 10 years ago, maybe longer than that. But at any rate, I was like, how are they that expensive? And it's because they're more autonomous. They're smarter. They fly for you. Maybe even a little worse than they used to fly, but like whatever. And yeah, it's the cost is a real concern. Because when you're asking someone to spend a lot of money, it's you're asking them to make some trade-offs.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they're really only like, yes, these use cases have been things people have talked about for a while, but I think it's really only recently the technology can actually do it, like you're saying, to the level that people would expect, like the like autonomous security drone. Like that probably requires some pretty massive AI breakthroughs that have only been like in the past year or two. Battery technology, like all this stuff, um, makes me think like on when you think about like civilian SIGINT and that sort of stuff, like that's very new. Um, and I think potentially an interesting application, like you said about drone swarms. I think Chuck is playing like he doesn't want to mess with this stuff, but he actually loves. So, like Ubiquity devices, like
Oh
Ubiquity
yeah.
Wi-Fi points and cameras and stuff. Yeah, that's like, he has a big setup of those, and it kind of reminds me, like, if you apply that model to, okay, a drone swarm or like my 2 or 3 drones that run security around my property, What is the like ubiquity version of that where it's all on prem, it doesn't go to the cloud, I can log in and monitor like all the packets on the network, all the SIGINT, locations of the drones, what they're recording. And then where it gets super interesting is, okay, like, can I connect that to my neighbors or my 5 neighbors? And those drones talk to one another, without relying on like the cell network being up, for example. And I think like that is not something that was possible even a few years ago technologically. So like, yes, this stuff has been around for a while, but it kind of hasn't like the level of cool stuff you can do with it, that continues to grow is actually very new.
Yeah. The again, like it comes down to the networking side of things, and that is something that very much I think is actually in a way is really at the end of the day the coolest thing that's happening right now is how do you get all these different systems talking specifically off cloud. I think once you have drones flying around, like there's I think there's is there an Amazon isn't there an Amazon drone that flies inside your house to that they have out or did they announce
There
that?
was.
That's the
It kind of
ring.
faded away.
Yeah, like who
Yeah,
would want that though? Like that's the thing is that like you don't want like this other thing that's clearly talking, talking to the cloud and flying around your house can look at you whenever it wants. You want something that you really do control.
yeah,
And so that's where I think the break point is for all that stuff is who controls what.
yeah. Okay, ubiquity, drone mounted firearms. That's the next product.
In Minecraft, just for the FAA and FCC, just FYI.
Exactly.
And ATA, yeah. How many federal agencies
Yeah, just
will we be
all the
arrested
agencies.
by?
It's hard to talk about drones without talking about 3D printing,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've become pretty competent at what I assume is FDM style printing. It looks like if I understood your social media right, you banged out a PET CF frame that was like pretty
Okay.
sturdy, or was it some other material? What's like the hot new stuff in 3D printing for UAVs?
So I've dabbled a little bit in 3D printing, but that was all second order effects. So those guys are the guys building the drones. I get to sell their drones through the site. But the frame that they built, it's crazy. A lot of people think that like 3D printing means weak. They definitely kind of maybe have a chip on their shoulder about that a little bit because they've developed a drone that like I think they stacked. I think it was 260 pounds of weights just
Yeah, it
on
was a
it.
stack of weights like halfway up the size of a man. It was bananas.
Yeah, and it's got some carbon fiber reinforcement in there, which kind of helps out a little bit with that rigidity. But yeah, like the idea behind that drone is that it's going to be durable. It's gonna last you for a long time. And the other cool thing about it is that a lot of their mindset is what's repairable in an austere environment. So even if like maybe that if you hit it hard enough and that carbon fiber reinforcement breaks, you can still print something that is going to get you back up in the air to go complete whatever mission you're in. So um, that's a huge part of their thing is modification and then kind of on demand manufacture for whatever your mission set is a big part of their philosophy.
Got it. Are you
Yeah.
leveraging 3D printers for anything that you prototype or kind of work on, or even production level things that you kind of poop out at printers?
So not as much as I'd like. So mostly what I've been doing, but I do work with a ton with people that are doing either 3D printing or they're doing tons of CNC right now, which has kind of been the fact that people have that, if you're so let me back up and say a lot of the guys that I've been working with to bring onto the site that are newer products that are kind of on the cutting edge are guys in their garage figuring that stuff out. So the the hardened Meshtastic radio. That guy has his own CNC in his garage, and he's cooking out the top pieces for his radio that way. And it's boosted. If he was having to machine each one of these by hand, it'd take him forever. But because he's got a CNC, he's able to knock out dozens of them very quickly. So um, it's pretty crazy seeing what's happening in distributed manufacturing. I haven't been directly involved with it, but I'm definitely getting to see it very up close.
Yeah, I keep thinking that that's the end of FDM printers because, but then they keep coming out with better materials, better material handling. Like the bamboo was a break. Like the drone world doesn't. I mean, DJI is pretty much the bamboo of the 3D, of the drone world. So yeah, bamboo made it like four color printing with a wide variety of materials, pretty much almost push button, easy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm glad to see that that we're. I mean, agreeing on a question here, it's like there's this confluence of like 3D printing, AI and LLMs, comms, drones, like all this stuff seems to be like swirling around each other, like connecting, and like there's something that's gonna like this is gonna be enabling for something quite dramatic. These at least these four technologies kind of floating around each other.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, if you imagine this 60 years ago, like, you'd have, uh, basically presses, drill presses to work with, instead of CNC, you'd have to go to a library to go and read books to go learn the stuff that you could just go to an LLM and talk about. Um, and it's just crazy again what's happening in people's garages right now. um and then there's a huge movement too just to decentralize information and knowledge, onto basically like hard drives that have it set up as like a little server in your house. So even if you lose the internet, you still have all this information at hand, which is pretty cool. And it's a whole other thing that I haven't even gotten into as deeply, but it's a cool movement. uh,
On jumping back to the radio piece, like um,
yeah.
signal jammers, you go on X and you can read a lot about like, oh, these robbers in South Africa use signal jammers, and that's kind of a maybe a meme at this point. What's the equilibrium on signal jammers? Like, why are they why are they not everywhere? Uh, what stops that? Uh, will that continue to be the case in the future? Like, what's the equilibrium in 10 years when everybody's using radios for all sorts of stuff?
Yeah, and I'm actually not sure why they're not more useful or not more widely used here. I imagine they will be, to be super honest with you, because yeah, it's kind of weird to even say this stuff out loud because hopefully you don't let the wrong person hear it on a podcast. But like, I mean, if you're most people are using wireless, security cameras, they're using Wi-Fi, they're using cell phones to call the cops, they're doing, they're completely reliant on radio frequencies.
Yeah, I mean the
Um,
FCC kind of is the traditionally very heavy-handed. So I think we have a mindset because of the FCC and so many years of control that to get a transmission, like an unlicensed wideband transmission device, is just not in anyone's frame of mind unless you're crooked.
yeah.
And then what do you care, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like that's the thing. And so and criminals are getting really smart with the way they go and attack, things. So like you'll see a lot of the times, security cam footage of like people using repeaters to basically basically act as a repeater for your key fob that's in your house, and they'll have that outside your house, and it'll then bridge the connection. Your car will think that your key's right next to the door, and they'll go start up the car and drive it away. And so there's a lot of like electronic warfare happening for crime here in the States already. The jammer side of thing is really, I think, one of the reasons why you don't see this much here in the US, because I don't think people often, we still get, home invasions, but it's not like to the same extent as, say, South Africa. When you're really looking to hurt somebody and stop them from being able to call the cops and knock everything out temporarily and give them no warning, that's where a signal jammer really comes into play. And yeah, being able to detect and be aware of something like that. Like again, too, like it'd be a cool device for like a consumer might be, hey, is it detecting signal jamming? It's just a loud siren that goes off. That would be a useful tool, to help thwart that. But it's just the problem is it hasn't quite arisen yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm imagining someone who's like really prepared turning on the signal
Yeah.
jammer when the robbers break in and being like, you're
Yes.
trapped in here with me now.
Yeah, exactly. It's the
Um,
Rorschach.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like, it's one of those things where it seems like an inevitable cat and mouse game of technology that just hasn't played out yet. Because maybe criminals in the US are generally more opportunistic, and there isn't some like grand raid they have planned or something for the most part, fortunately. um but yeah, like that tech is only going to get cheaper and more available, and once someone stumbles on it, like it's going to spread, and then the cat and mouse game plays out.
But there is the legislative part of it still can't be ignored. It's like Glock switches, right? Or even lightning, parts you can drop into a lower. It's easy to do, but there's societal and government kind of. You can't buy a signal jammer here, I don't think, easily. A broad spectrum.
So
broadcast.
I think it's perfectly legal to purchase one and have possession of one, as opposed to like something like a lightning link or something like that, which I think is illegal to even probably say or talk about.
Don't draw the shape of it with your finger.
Yeah, no,
YouTube just went to the toilet. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't picture it in your head. Don't that'd be bad. So anyway, but yeah, like I think it's totally fine to possess these things so long as you're not using them. So
but
that's
you
the question.
you can't actually put a signal out, right? The minute you do, you're done. Yeah.
But it's also like, I mean, these things are so short distance. Like again, the FCC is not going to come after you for hopping unlicensed on a ham radio or necessarily. Again, don't do that for anyone listening. But it's if you're already going in to raid someone's house, you're not that worried about the FCC at that point, I don't think. So it's just one of those things. It's definitely coming about, and people, we should sync back over to the fiber optic drones too on this topic.
I was going to ask you, is there any use for these outside of war zones for the fiber optic? It seems like a big negative, a big hassle, but in a war zone, it makes perfect sense when you have it in a denied environment. But do you think there's use outside of that?
So maybe not necessarily just the fiber optic, but like I could foresee a use case if there's actually another kind of tethered drone that's being used a lot in Ukraine, that's just as a signals platform or a signal intelligence platform or whatever. You might just need a drone that just loiters up in the air for days on end, and they actually power the drone, but they also
like a tethered, like a traditional tethered.
Yeah, exactly. And so that I could see a civilian use case for, because then you're not having to necessarily charge batteries constantly for it or bring it down and swap it out. So if you're wanting to do something like here in Austin and for Meshtastic, we do a thing called Sunset Club every night at sunset. And basically there's a bunch of users that put their drones up with Meshtastic radios on. We all talk all over the town, and we have extra coverage at that time, which is pretty fun. But it only lasts for about 20 minutes. If you miss it, if you show up 10 minutes late, it's almost over. So like if you're able to put up a drone reliably for about an hour or two, no problem, to support that, that'd be a lot of fun. That has some obvious disaster relief scenarios, but the fiber side, like, I potentially there's someone that could come up with a use case. I just haven't thought of it yet. Or I haven't heard it yet for necessarily a civilian, perfectly within the letter of the law use case, but I think people should have it all the same.
Would there be a legal issue with having a tether? Just so people understand, as I understand it, in environments where you're getting RF or signal jamming, like in warfare, and you can't get GPS and you don't have SLAM navigation on the drone, you can spool a many kilometers long piece of fiber optic cable that comes out the butt of the drone attached to your controller, and it's just you're flying by wire. You're flying by light, which is a great idea because light moves pretty quick, as we all know, way faster than radio and everything else. So that's proven. I've seen that you can see them now being used in Ukraine. And the question we're all kind of batting around here is like, what's the civilian use case there? And this is an interesting case just in the broader sense of usually it's like in my environment in tech, and why we started, why Anduril was started back in the day was because it used to be that like World War II and whatnot, like warfare drove innovation on the civilian side in many cases, right? And certainly in aerospace and other areas, and comms, radar, stuff like that. But that fell away. And now it was technology driving stuff into the military use. And that's why Anduril and all these new startups in the defense tech space exist. But now it's almost coming back the other way because of Ukraine. Now we're getting like better advances back in the military in the form of UAVs and mainly in the form of UAVs that should come back into the civilian space. Kareem's big complaint with Anduril is that they're incredibly cool and they build amazing stuff, but it's not stuff that he's going to see, right? It's like you want all that stuff that Anduril's doing in the civilian market, right? So it's interesting that,
Yeah, and so two things with that. For one, just needs to be said, if you have any connection to Anduril that can bring their night vision, their smart night vision system that they're working on to the civilian market, please exert that influence to make that happen. So now that that's out of the way, fiber optic drones for civilian use. Yeah, like there's definitely like so. Let me put it this way: with when you're flying analog or digital, like signal loss is a thing when you're flying. So if you are let's go back to Helene. Let's like pretend like we had a fiber drone or in a RF drone, and you were needing like there's someone that needed insulin now, and you were going to fly up the drone to go get them. Like the fiber drone is going to be way more reliable at getting to that location than the RF drone. So that might be a good civilian use case. Um, the problem is that it's really expensive. You can't, it's just basically it's an expendable is what the military is treating it like. You can actually see photos. It looks like spider webs all through the like just a cloud of spider webs all through the trees of like used fiber cable, which is super disturbing. Because you wonder what happened at the other end of that fiber cable, but like, like it's a thing, and so that would be what I think the use case is because it's funny to me. Like if you just compare the FPV feeds from the fiber drones versus the non-fiber, you can just tell because there's like a lot of snow and interference on the RF drones and none on the fiber drones. It's like a perfectly clear picture. So that's definitely a use case. Um, so I would say that yeah, there's definitely a use case potentially, but yeah, the cost is going to be really like it's going to be like when they passed the NFA and full auto weapons became extremely cost prohibitive, all of a sudden, you know, that's gonna stop the civilian use case of having fun. You know, so yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, we should probably let you go. We're coming up on an hour. If people want to learn more about Constellation Response and what you're working on, what you're doing, where should they go and what should they know?
Yeah. So follow me everywhere. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. So if you have any or all those platforms, please by all means hop on there. I'm also on TikTok, but I don't post on there quite as much just because. And then also just visit our website, constellationresponse.com. You can sign up for our mailing list, where we'll send out, basically every other week we send some updates out of blog posts, news, things like that out, as well as new product releases and things like that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. Thank you. We'll have to have you back. I feel like we could have gone for another 5 hours on this stuff.
Definitely. Awesome. Love to anytime.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care, Rob.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Take care. Bye.